Good morning, everybody. How are we? Give everybody a minute to catch up. There he is. Good morning, brother. Blessings and blessed be. How are you? Welcome back to Paranormal Witchcraft LLC. This is the channel where we approach the paranormal differently. I'm on a schedule today, so if you see me turn my head, it means our handyman has walked in. Good morning, you two. How are you? I'll take these off. I do have somebody coming to start working on our HVAC for us, but it'll take them a while to get set up, so I should be okay with the live. The door is open though, so you might hear other people walking in and out. Know that they are meant to be here and it's okay. Good morning, you two. How are you? So I asked the question, what if nothing out there is actually triggering you? What if it's happening from inside yourself with your anxiety and fears when it comes to the paranormal? You think it's paranormal, but maybe for some it started inside of you. We were talking last night about how anxiety and fears have everybody in the world under some kind of power grip. Every choice they make, every thought, every action is geared toward what's going on subconsciously in the world around them. When you do that, you're changing your behavior. You're allowing the world to affect you. That is where anxiety comes from. And almost everybody on the planet has some form of anxiety. I think we can all agree on that. So my question was, what if nothing is actually being triggered? That being said, let's turn on our guest here. All right. What if this thing isn't being triggered by paranormal? What if sometimes it's being affected by the investigators? Right. Good morning. No worries, no fears. That's right. You can't live in fear, especially if the world is going down or it's, we're going to hell in a handbasket, pardon the phrase. But if that's the truth, wouldn't you think you'd want to be braver? You would think so. It's the ones who stand up and be brave and be different and fight against the masses that usually, against all odds, create change. If you look at our histories, that is how change has occurred. So you think it's paranormal, but maybe it started inside you. All right, let's talk about that. So right now, let's stop. And before you call it paranormal, before you call it a spirit, before you say something followed you, what if nothing out there triggered you? What if it started inside you? It's a fair question this morning. A lot of people live their lives under the influence of some form of fear. Just got to be honest with yourself about it. Most people in this field, particularly, aren't reacting to the paranormal. They're reacting to internal states they don't recognize or they're not aware of, like we've been talking. Inadvertently, subconsciously, your mind is triggering things, creating things, and people are believing it and recognizing it as paranormal. We have a comment from Dark Light Pyre 6866. Past life traumas or childhood traumas, shadow work is a must. Yeah. I always get a kick, and I'll say this again, I always get a kick out of it when I go to events and people find out I'm a witch and I'm newly psychic and I haven't had time to devote to that. I do hope to by the end of the year, but you'd be surprised how many people who are just normal people, call themselves normal, don't have, that are paranormal investigators. And as soon as they find out you're a practicer or you're psychic, their behavior towards you changes, doesn't it? Right? Their body language, the way they act, the way they talk, immediately different. Why is that, do you think? Fear, anxieties. But why? Right? I just said hi. Paranormal witchcraft. I'm a witch. We also do paranormal investigating, and I'm newly psychic. Haven't had time to develop it yet. And you should see people's faces. They look. You can see them deciding if they believe you or not. All right. And the ones that do, they'll lean in and talk to you. The ones that don't, they'll pull back. All right. And find something to distract themselves because the anxiety or the fear is too much for them to face. You creep them out, but they don't want to tell you that. Humanity needs more of that honesty. If somebody bothers you, what is it about them that bothers you? What is it about practicers that bothers you? Is it this stigma, stereotype that's floating around the world? We don't know. All right. Because nobody's brave enough to say why, besides the fact, you tie in the religious aspects and then it gets really crazy and chaotic. And that's not what we're here for. If you live your life in some form of fear, remember, that's healthy. But if you let it control every action, every moment of your life, that is unhealthy, right? What if nothing out there triggered you? What if it is something inside of you? Everything we learned from is supposed to be teaching us a lesson about ourselves. Most people in this field aren't reacting to the paranormal. They're reacting to internal states they may not recognize. You don't walk into an investigation neutral. You walk in carrying stress for the most part. Think about this. Expectations, some form of excitement, anxiety, or fear, and your unresolved emotions for the day. Are you having a good day, a bad day, a shitty day, a fuck the world day? Which one is it? That might be affecting your paranormal investigation. And then you interpret that environment through that emotional and psychological state. And this is where containment over chaos, evidence over egos plays a big role in getting ourselves back down to earth, making sure our egos are in check. There are two forces in every paranormal investigation: external stimulus, internal stimulus, meaning ourselves. That's why we test the investigators on this channel. We test the equipment. Notice TZ hasn't had much to say today. Is it because we're not triggered? So it's not triggered. That's what we're here to find out on this channel. Is it us affecting our devices? Could be, sometimes. Most investigators can't really tell the difference. Ouch. I'll say that again. Most investigators can't really tell the difference or don't care. It does hurt, but it's the truth. Because getting rich is too much of an appeal for some, right? So that's why you'll see the fear narrative, because fear is something that gets people's attention. It's easy to sell. People buy into it. It's highly relatable. I could keep going. If you think about yourself in a deeper manner, you might catch yourself noticing the pattern. And if you notice this pattern, it's something I say a lot of times on this channel, is once you see the pattern, it may very well change the way you look at paranormal investigation and research forever. You'll start treating those people like a hot flame. No, right? You'll find yourself gaining interest in other fellows. You'll find yourself walking away from people like that in the paranormal field that are just all about themselves, right? When anxiety spikes, the brain looks for a reason. Your brain is just doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's our responsibility to tell the difference. That's where the responsibility comes in. And when it doesn't find a cause because of that anxiety spike, it creates one. Ow, it creates one. Be honest right now with me, my friends, and I'll be honest with you every day, every night, as we have been. But be honest. Have you ever felt fear before anything actually happened? Yes. We can talk about that. Let's unpack that. We were just talking about how fear is a good weapon for us for survival. We were talking about how anxiety is a security tool that we're supposed to be using. If we're anxious, why are we anxious? What is it about that that's making us anxious? If anxiety turns into fear, now you have a problem, because now fear is controlling your body and you don't even realize it because you're giving it power. You're saying your mentality is too weak to push through the fears. Your mentality is too weak to figure out why you have to cast stones at others, right? When in all reality, if something bothers you around you, it's meant to get you to stop, pause, restabilize, and ask yourself a question. Why does that person, place, or thing bother me? Most times you'll find out there's something in you that's unhappy or needs work, and that's why someone around you bothers you. That's why you'll have to say things in a religious standpoint or otherwise, because you feel threatened. But why do we feel so threatened sometimes? Right? What is it about those statements sometimes that make people so threatened? Right? It's why I don't talk religion with most people, because it's like politics. It gets so out of hand so quick, and before you know it, you've lost a friend over. It's like betting sports. People lose friends and get into fights over that as well. Those are three things I will never talk about: sports, politics, or religion, because people can't handle themselves. You can't have a long-term conversation because somebody always gets upset. Why? I have no interest in all that stuff, but the rest of the world does. Most people follow the news. Most people follow sports. Most people follow trends. Well, that's why I don't. Because somewhere in all that, like we were talking the other night, people can't handle themselves. All right. They start throwing rocks at other people. That's why I will never talk those three subjects ever. I'll walk away from people before I'll talk, because it gets so out of hand so quick. And then you will find out that the opinions are so much that some people can't even be your friend because of those differences. Sounds a little silly when you break it down, doesn't it? Because it is. It's a self-centered behavior when people act like that. And I am no stranger to that. I've done a lot of shadow work. I've fallen back on behaviors like that myself and had to straighten myself out. But it took me a while to learn that I was doing something wrong, to learn that I was being conditioned by others without realizing it, which is why we ask those deeper questions, because most people don't even stop to think or even realize they're caught up in some kind of thing. Happens every day. Emotions, anxiety, and fear. Some investigators aren't discovering activity. Once anxiety activates in your body, it's really hard to keep yourself calm. But if you can teach yourself how to do it through what our friend said, shadow work, or as what we call in the witchcraft world, service work, you're working on yourself to be a better practicer, a better pagan. All right. Or if you're religious, that's why you go to church every week. That's why you believe in God. That's why you pray. You're trying to get rid of your transgressions and be a better person, not pray and then do it again the next day, and then go to church once a week and call yourself a good person. That is not how it works. You can't say you're a good person and then not act like a good person, right? So if you go to church, all right, that's a good example to use because a lot of people do every Sunday, all right? But there are a lot of people out there that will go to church and then for the next 6 days, they just act a fool. And then they go to church again. They feel like they've done something spiritual. It makes them a good person to do that every week. And so that's a weird, twisted form of, yeah, not going to go there. That's why we don't talk about it. So it gets dicey real quick, and that's not what we're here for today. So be honest. Have you ever felt fear before anything actually happened? Yes. We all do every day. We just probably don't stop and think about it. Try to stop and think about it for a week. You might surprise yourself. You have a lot going on in there that you're not even paying attention to because there's so much going on in the world. It's hard to stay focused on what you're feeling, what you're thinking. Sorry, what you're feeling, what you're thinking. Once anxiety spikes and activates. Every sound feels intentional. Every shadow feels directed, like it's meant directly for you. Isn't that right? See, now I'm trying to antagonize it. Nothing. Okay. But possibly because I'm in a good mood, it knows I'm not threatening it. No. There you are. But, anyways, every silence will feel heavy and deliberate. Happens all the time. We'll go back to my example yesterday when that buck came through the windshield and we were talking, cruise controls on, middle of the night, and boom! Few seconds, right? Not even. It was all over with. Best thing I did was keep myself calm, right? But was I startled? Well, fuck yeah, I was startled. You're dead quiet, talking to your wife, cruising down the road, nothing in front of you, and all of a sudden, bam, there's a fucking deer looking right at you, just as confused as you are. Right? And so I had to make a choice. Am I going to freak out, let go of the wheel, let the car flip over, or whatever? Or am I going to stay calm, restabilize myself, and take control of the situation? Keep my wife safe, myself safe, etc. Because once anxiety activates, it's really hard. Every sound feels intentional. It's like in slow motion, etc. Every shadow feels directed. Every silence feels heavy. Not because something changed, though, but because something you did changed. That is a human being who is now manufacturing paranormal interpretation. And it sells. Because fear sells, just like sex sells and other things sell. Violence sells, right? That's how simple it is to get people to buy what you're doing when you're storytelling in the paranormal, because you don't stop to think about it. That person's storytelling, that person's performing and storytelling, right? Once you see the pattern, you may never go back. But, our framework isn't for everybody, obviously. There's 2 or 3 people in here. So most of the people in the world prefer to just buy into the narrative just because it's easier and they really don't care, right? But for the serious individuals, these questions do matter. Some investigations and some investigators are not discovering activity, they're manufacturing their own interpretations. A controlled investigator versus an unaware or a careless one. That's what I call the people who want to perform and just storytell because it sells the fastest and they get the most views, they get the most followers, subscriptions, and it actually works for them. If you're one of those people, then this channel probably isn't for you. Okay. But if that does bother you, because the truth is starting to be taken out of the paranormal field and it's all about the storytelling, it's all about follow the circuit around the country every year to every convention. And then what? Right? And then what? And then what? Right? Because you can only perform something so long. You can only sensationalize something for so long before people lose interest. Do you get what we're trying to say? So, yeah, it's great that fear narrative works so well. But what happens when the world gets tired of that buzz? What are they going to do then? Right? Might as well be authentic. Might as well try to be a real investigator in that way, meaning you're there more for the truth. It's great to be scared. It's great to be with your friends. It's great to travel the country year in and year out to the same places. But are you doing it because you want to get to the truth of what's on the other side of the realm? Or are you doing it because of the rest of the world, isn't it? It was a good idea at the time. Okay? They're manufacturing their own interpretation. A controlled investigator would never do that. Versus somebody who's doing it on purpose, and there's a lot of them. One creates clarity, the other creates chaos. Containment over chaos, evidence over egos creates clarity, something everybody can see clearly. You don't have to fake it. Just like when this thing answers, we're not engaging it. This is not an investigation right now. This is an experiment in real time, right? One investigation technique creates clarity, validation, credibility. The other one creates nothing but storytelling, performance, sensationalism, and chaos. Tonight we'll test this again at 8 o'clock. I'm not sure with what or how, but we'll figure it out. Today was just about talking about how our simple everyday anxieties and fears could and might be playing a part in our paranormal investigations for some. What happens when anxiety is controlled versus just letting yourself freak the fuck out on purpose? Huge difference. We'll find out tonight. Does the paranormal response change with that factor or that variable, if we're being scientific about it? If you can't tell the difference, then you're probably not investigating. If you can't personally tell the difference, you're probably not paranormal investigating, you're storytelling. You're interpreting your own state. Plainly put, thank you for the thumbs up. Tonight we will find out which one you've been doing. Thank you, my friends. How is everybody? Hopefully everybody's doing well. Let me check the window. All right, so not here yet, so that's good. We're right on time, 20-minute mark, give or take. So let's take some comments, my friends. There we are. Hello, Truth Tarot readings. Yes, right. Yes, right. Chris says, or TZ is listening with his ears and not his mouth. I agree with that. We were talking about that last night, Nikki. Like, just because it's not saying anything, we were saying things like, how would you feel if somebody just kept walking up to you going, we know you're here. We know you're here. Come on, talk to us right now. Come on. We're not afraid of you. We're your daddy. All right. It wasn't working last night. All right. Escalation rarely works in these experiments with Paranormal Witchcraft LLC. That escalation experiment rarely works. Why do we think that is at this juncture? We've been talking about fear and escalation off and on for about 2 months and why everyone is pushing the fear narrative. All right. So you see this thing's in my hand. It is not being affected by me right now. Right? Key important part. If I was affecting that device, it would go off, would it not? Yes. But I'm purposely not trying to engage the devices when I do a paranormal investigation. I am not here to make these things do the work for me to make me look like a better investigator. That is storytelling. No. Thank you. Right? And so, again, back to authenticity as a human being. People have lost the meaning of that on social media. It is now all think tank mentality. Too many people are afraid of being unique and authentic. Because they're afraid of all the confrontation of the rest of humanity. Why? If I can be authentic in who I am, why can't you guys? Because they tell you you can't? Who's telling you you can't? Where are they? Why do they tell you that? On what grounds does another human being have to tell you that you can't do something? Never. So why, oh why, dear gods in the universe, are humans letting this happen right now? Great question, right? Because people are afraid right now. And it's easier to lash out at others than it is to face our own personal fears. That is the enticement of paranormal investigation right there. It's easier to do something like that in our brains than it is to face ourselves. Think about that. Why did you end up being a paranormal researcher, investigator, or a pagan or whatever? Why? Think about that. I think a lot of times most people on both sides of the fence, whether you're religious or not, will find that our traumas, our PTSD, our histories have probably brought us to where we are. But why? Because we are looking for something in the unknown that we think will complete us. Think about it that way. What is the enticement? What is this passion, this love we have for the paranormal? Where did it come from? What is the ultimate goal here? Is it storytelling? Is that what it means to be a paranormal investigator? That I can sit up here and tell a story with the best of them? So that's what would make me a great paranormal investigator? That's only part of it. You have to be somebody who's likable, right? Which is hard to do in this field because nobody likes each other. Everybody knows more than the next guy. Everybody has more experience. Everybody has more followers. They don't have time to look at the small people, even though at one time they were you with barely any followers. Funny how that works, isn't it? When you trade your passion for glory, you're giving into a fear. You're giving into a fear that you'll never be good enough without that glory. You'll never be a happy human being without that money. You'll never be a happy human being unless you're popular and you have thousands of followers. That is living literally in fear every day. And if you go back to social media, you'll see it being repeated by the billions. Think about that. That being said, thank you for tuning in to the Paranormal Laboratory briefing once again. Tonight, we will remove fear on purpose, and then we will re-inject fear on purpose into the next investigation. So I look forward to seeing you guys there. Thank you for the thumbs up, guys. It's about time that a human being stands up and is honest. Brutally honest. All right. That's just how I look at it today. All right. The way people treat each other on the platforms is not how you're supposed to treat each other. That's why I'm not on the platforms. Am I missing opportunities for this channel to grow? Probably by the thousands. But is it worth it to swim in that kind of fakery? Is it worth it to swim in that kind of disinformation? Is it worth it for Paranormal Witchcraft LLC as a business to give in to the temptations of the world just because that's what everyone else does? No. Okay? You do you. All right?
No.
We're not here to judge each other, my friends. We're here to learn from each other. We're here to collaborate with each other. And nobody wants to do that because nobody wants to what? Nobody wants to be wrong. And that's what drives people's egos. They have to know more. They have to know more people. They have to have more resources. They have to have the best podcasts. They have to have the best equipment. They have to have the entire world at their fingertips. But they can't remember where they came from. Whatever. So we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon. Be right there.